Hello everyone and welcome to Scrap to Piece. My name is Lydia, also known as Illustrata, and just like you saw in the video before, we are going to be making a big sister doll. So I have done an entire big sister cosplay before and it was a disaster. In theory, it worked. Like, all the parts worked. I was able to make the oxygen tank, the little sister cage that sits on the big sister's back, whole costume. I made the corset and everything, but this is honestly the only part that actually worked. I did not have hot glue at the time. Everything on this thing is held together by puffy paint. So, like, these details, these are made from linings from jeans. These are just random pieces of material I found around my parents' house and backyard. But I can barely see through these. Honestly, I don't even know if you can hear me. So this helmet was originally made from a motorcycle helmet. There's the whole motorcycle helmet structure, all made from fiberglass. My dad cut out the front of it so it would actually be able to make into the helmet. And this piece, where my neck goes, this is actually made from the foam that was inside the helmet. So, let's talk about materials. So for all you doll collectors out there, you guys probably remember when Marvel/Mattel came out with a doll line of Marvel-inspired fashion dolls. And so I thought they were really cool, but whenever I would find them, they were extremely overpriced, and so I never got one. So I actually found one of them at Deseret Industries ages ago. I don't even remember when I picked it up, but I found the Iron Man one. So she didn't have any of the clothing, any of the shoes or details or anything, just the doll. This is currently sitting at my tallest doll. She's about a head or two taller than an average Monster High doll. I mainly got her because I was like, oh, this is a doll I don't have, so I'm gonna get it. Then I remember getting the idea, like, hey, I should make that into a big sister. That'd be really, really cool. So after I pulled the idea from the jar, I was kind of thinking, what if I made a little sister to go with her? And so I scrounged around and looked into my stash, and I have one of the old Kelly dolls. Got this from a friend. She also has articulated knees, so I feel like that will be more ideal for doing a little sister. And she has the dress, so I'll just sew it in so it's a little bit more cinched. I am not skilled in sewing dolls' clothing. That is one skill that I would like to improve on, don't get me wrong. But in the meantime, I'm not the greatest at it. So most of the time when I'm making doll projects, I slap it all together and just glue them, paint them. So that's probably what we're going to end up doing with this one. Let's start construction on this big sister. So when I started this project, I tried making a full bodysuit from white fabric, but that did not go well. So I scrapped it. So to start on this project, I took a pair of Ken pants and cropped them into shorts, then started the long process of wrapping ribbons around the top and bottoms of the shins and the thighs to create a almost ribbon wrapped fabric effect, because when you look at the concept art, that is where the bodysuit is visible. And on the upper part of the thighs, there are sections of buckled leather. So I cut more pieces of the pants and then cropped them to cover up that section, because those will be covered with ribbons later. I had recorded my process on how I made the shirt. I decided against including it in the video. Moving on, I cut out the corset pieces from craft foam. Initially it was about 4 pieces, but it ended up being closer to 6 pieces once I actually started gluing them to the doll. I decided to add the side pieces first, then adding the small extra pieces after that, before finally adding on both the back pieces and the front pieces. Next, on to making the base for the gauntlets, also made out of craft foam and glued directly to both of her arms. So moving on to the shoes, I used a pair of Frankenstein shoes and the upper part of a pair of Rebecca Steam shoes that I had used the lower part for a previous project. I had no use for the heels, so they had to go. Also, these shoes are so much smaller than the actual feet of the Marvel doll, so I actually had to crop down both her feet and make the shoes a little bit bigger so they didn't fit on her. After removing some of the extra unnecessary details from the shoes, I also went in and removed the buckle pieces, because I actually wouldn't end up needing them for the project. I thought I would at some point, but they just work better as just the shoes themselves. Now for the upper part of the boots, I didn't really want to keep those little kind of steam engine bits on there, so I took an X-Acto knife, almost cut myself in the process, and removed them. One thing I wasn't expecting was once I removed these extra details that there is now a hole in both sides of the boots, but nothing that I can't fix with hot glue. One detail that ended up being pretty ideal was the fact that there was a small space in between the boots and the shoes, so I was able to add another ribbon layer, which turns out that's actually part of the actual concept art. So, did the right thing, without even realizing it. With the back of the shins being exposed, I did end up adding a small triangle of foam to kind of cover up that extra space. And speaking of covering things up, I used small sections of foam to add the metal details that are on the exterior of both of her legs. And there's also a small piece that goes on the inner part of the legs as well. There are also some extra bits of foam that I added to the gauntlets. So if you look at the concept art, there are metal wires that connect to the major joints of her legs, and originally I was going to go through with all of the metal wiring and everything, but if I want this doll to be mobile and I can pose the doll, it just wasn't feasible, so I ended up adding buttons to both of her ankles on the inside and the outside and both sides of her knees.
to act as bolts where the wire would go. I might go in and add maybe a ribbon so she still has the mobility, but that remains to be seen. And now, ribbon montage. This first piece that I'm working on is the Big Sister Gauntlet, which is one of the more complicated pieces of the build. I have a lot of scrap pieces from an old miniature dollhouse build that I never used because I got it off Facebook Marketplace, and so it makes for great scrap pieces when you're making very detailed builds like this. For the pressure gauges, I just used buttons, and as I added more details, they're basically just toy pieces, just cut up and cropped together. This blue piece is actually from an Iron Man toy that I have, so I cropped off the pieces that I didn't need and made it into the main nozzle chamber for the gauntlet, and glued it on with a piece of foam as well. After attaching a trimmed needle, then I glued the gauntlet onto the rest of the arm. One small detail that I added to her arm is a small, I'm assuming, Eve vial. I didn't have any doll-sized baby bottles lying around, so I ended up improvising with a marker lid and a small extra piece, and then bordering the rest with ribbon to cover up the unsightly details. Then it was time to add more ribbon details to the gauntlet. Unfortunately not enough to make another ribbon montage, but it still looks cool. These ribbons were the perfect size to go through the slots on the wooden pieces, so they could secure the gauntlet to the arm. Remember those engine pieces from the boot covers? Well, I got to cut out the little gauges and glue them to the yellow rivets. Moving on to her other gauntlet, I used a small fake torpedo toy with another trim needle stuck into it. Glued that to her arm, and I also made another capsule piece and then wrapped those in ribbons as well. I also added a small dowel rod as extra detail. This gauntlet is very simplistic, so in comparison to the other gauntlet, it took me far less time to create this one. This armor piece came from a toy that I got at the dollar store, and I just glued it to her back and it ended up looking perfect. And the shoulder pieces I found as arms that were in a large bag of just random assorted toys, so I trimmed off the different gemstone pieces, eventually was able to remove them from the arm pieces. I also added some foam inserts to give it a little bit more dimension, make them a little bit more large, like hers are in the game. After gluing the shoulder pieces on, there are a few more ribbon details on the arms that I had to add. And now we're on to creating the breastplate, which is literally the term for it on a deep sea diver's suit. I literally had to look it up because I could not think of what it was. So I made the base out of cardboard from a candy box and then made the top layers out of foam. I did both the front piece and the back piece, both with the same method. As a bit of an homage to my last attempt at making this costume, I decided to use some puffy paint to make the bolts that go on the breastplate. This didn't end up turning out super well because puffy paint doesn't dry very quickly, so I ended up just making little bolts out of craft foam and then just stuck them on there. And then added an extra strip of foam to... Gluing these two breastplate pieces on was very satisfying because it really pulled together how far this project has come since I started it, and it makes me very proud of how it looks now. I added an extra piece of foam to give it a little bit more dimension. To start the helmet process, I cut off the neck of a supplement bottle because it was the right dimensions to fit the neck area on the doll, and it seemed to have that kind of rigid area for a diver's mask. And I trimmed it so it had a little bit more of a curve, so it wasn't just hovering above the doll's neck. And then just secured it with hot glue, as I do almost everything. One of the conundrums with this build is the fact that the only baubles that I have are this big. Her helmet is not this big, and I don't know how to make it smaller. So I don't want to have it this big. I almost wonder if I have a choice though. So I do have this, and it lights up, but I'm not gonna light it up right now. This would probably actually be pretty much the perfect size. I hate having to break it and cut it up. This is my only option at this point. So let's try it. Alright, quick experiment with an X-Acto knife and we're good as golden. Well, it actually will fit the head, but oh, it's the perfect size. Wonderful. I got it on. Yay. She is cramped in there, my goodness. But she can move her head, so that is good to know, so I can be able to rotate. We'll just have to glue up the back of the head. Glue that closed. So this is one of the pieces from the bauble that I cut off when I was trying to make it actually fit. I have a red gem as well for that eye port, so basically if I just stick through this through here, it'll be perfect. Then I just have to glue little extra details around it, so fantastic. Then we have an extra one for this part. It's a little top hat. And the eye port will be right here. Oh, this looks perfect. I'm so excited. Yes. Oh my gosh, I love this so much. She's looking so good. Also, one detail, she can turn her head. This is turning out so much better than I expected. Sorry, I'm like going crazy right now. This is like dream come true. It's looking fantastic. So I decided the first part of the video was just taking too much time, so I am actually going to be splitting this video into two parts. This first part is just going to be labeled as the assembly of the doll, because it took a lot of time, and I still have the little sister to make. I still have the cage that goes on the big sister's back, but also the oxygen tank that still needs to attach to that. And on top of that, I still have to paint everything. It only seems right to just split it into two parts. So I hope you enjoyed the part one of this video adventure. This has been such a fun project so far. I tend to forget how much I love just adding copious amounts of details to it, and even though I'm not like a traditional like doll customizer, because I don't make the clothes, I'm not super skilled in the doll making, in the clothing making department, I love being able to just take things and just glue things together, and then it turns out far better than I expect. Honestly, I almost cried a few times working on this because I was so happy with how good it was looking, because every time I work on a project like this, I always have the 3 stages where it's just like the beginning stage when I'm like, wow, I really like how this concept is, I'm very excited to start it. And then pretty soon into the process, I'm like, I hate this. This is garbage. I just want to throw this away. But I continue to keep pushing through, and then I get past that kind of mountain, basically, where I can
actually start moving into is like, wow, I'm actually really impressed with how good this project is looking, and I'm very excited to continue working on it. So that's where I'm at right now. So I hope you will join me for the next part. Don't know how soon that will be coming out after this one, so keep an eye open for that. I hope you all have an artsy lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!